It's really stunning. But back to Gaza. Israel has moved its way through the Gaza Strip and is now at Rafah, the town that borders with Egypt, if you know the map. By the way, this is the wall between Egypt and Gaza, a more serious, more impenetrable wall than Israel had. Egypt, of course, like every Arab country, refuses to take any refugees from Gaza. They know all about Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, which is an international Islamist group that supports jihad, including Hamas. You might remember Egypt itself briefly had a coup, and the Muslim Brotherhood took over Egypt. And, Hillary Clinton and the Democrats were all in favor of it. They literally met with and normalized a terrorist government. Thankfully, the Egyptian people and their military rose up and threw them out. But Egypt is taking no chances again. They're not crazy. They're not going to take Hamas refugees. So Israel has methodically worked its way through Gaza, starting from the eastern side, which borders Israel. They have slowly made their way through it and are now near that border with Egypt. It's too grand a comparison, but it's like the Red Army closing in on Berlin in 1945. There was a time when the Nazis were deep into Russia. At least 20 million Russian civilians were killed, by the way. And so the Red Army was racing to Berlin as the Americans, the Brits, the Canadians were coming in from Western Europe. Imagine Russia, after suffering more casualties than any other country in the war, after an entire generation of Russian men had been ground up in the war. Imagine telling General Zhukov of the Red Army, you've got to stop at the outskirts of Berlin. Don't enter the city, and definitely don't go to Hitler's bunker. No, it's time for a ceasefire. Negotiate with the remnants of the Nazis. And by the way, Hitler wasn't holed up in his bunker with 100 Russian women and children as human shields, including for the obvious reason that Stalin wouldn't have hesitated for a second to kill hostages if they were in his way. At Stalingrad, Stalin's officers shot any Red Army conscript who abandoned his post. So the idea of asking the Russians not to take Berlin and not to kill or capture Hitler and not to utterly dismantle the Nazi Party and all of its power is too weird to even contemplate. Imagine in 1945 arguing that the Nazi government should be able to live on and that Hitler should be allowed to remain as long as he makes promises, pinky swear, not to invade Russia anymore. If that were a movie script, no one would make it. It's just too implausible. It's crazy, but that's exactly what Western leftists are saying. Here's Melanie Joly, and I only mentioned her because we're Canadian and she is our foreign minister, at least in name. I truly don't think anyone in the entire world cares what Melanie Joly has to say, other than, of course, Hamas, which literally made a thank you video for Canada after Trudeau voted against Israel at the UN. But I don't think there's a single serious diplomat or general or politician in the Western world who asks, what would Melanie Joly say? Or even in the Arab world for that matter. But here's what she said just 3 days ago, 2 days before these hostages were freed. We are deeply concerned by reports of an Israeli military operation in Rafah. It would have devastating impact, putting the lives of Palestinians and foreign nationals, including Canadians seeking refuge, in grave danger and making the vital delivery of humanitarian aid dangerous. And she continued, we continue our call for the protection of civilians, for the release of hostages, for urgent efforts towards a sustainable ceasefire, and for increased humanitarian aid. Isn't that odd? Joly really, really doesn't want Israel to take Rafah. Why? I'm sure she is concerned about civilians. Of course she is. There were civilians in Berlin too, by the way, and in Hiroshima and in Nagasaki. Israel's fighting the war in a more careful manner than perhaps any other war in history. It's not dropping a bomb over Gaza the way the Yanks did in Japan. But the thing about Hamas is they know the rules are different for Israel than for Stalin's Red Army or even Eisenhower's American Army or even Western armies of today. I mean, Obama attacked ISIS troops in a hospital in Mosul, Iraq. It made the news for a day, and that's it. People know that terrorists hide amongst civilians. Western armies try to be careful. Of course they do. But the thing about war is that it's warlike. It's not peaceful. If ISIS had surrendered, the attack on the hospital wouldn't have been necessary. Here's Joe Biden leaking to the Washington Post in a similar vein to Melanie Joly. Biden presses Netanyahu on plans for hostage release, protecting civilians in Rafah. How civilians will be spared from an Israeli offensive in the southernmost city in Gaza remains a huge question, a senior administration official said. I think it's a huge question, and I can think of some answers to it. Hamas surrenders. That would end the war immediately. That's what Japan did after the nukes. That's what Nazi Germany did after Hitler killed himself. I suppose the other alternative is the one that's happening. Israel's going in as carefully as any modern army can, that's faced with terrorists, and they've spent nearly 20 years, the terrorists have, planning for this attack by strategically placing their bases underneath hospitals and schools. It's been known for more than a decade that Hamas has its central command post under the big Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza. I mean, it makes sense if your goal is to stop any civilized country from attacking your terrorist headquarters, but it's obviously insane if you believe in protecting innocent human life. And don't tell me that you can literally have the Hamas headquarters under a hospital and that the hospital staff and administration and donors didn't know. Of course they knew. Here's video from the Al-Shifa hospital showing there was actually the first stop for the terrorists when they had finished taking their hostages. It's their place. It's their hangout. Imagine what they'll find in Rafah. Besides, of course, the Hamas leadership and hopefully surviving hostages. But here's a hint. You know that the UN has a massive permanent agency that runs Gaza. It's called UNRWA, which stands for UN Relief and Works Agency. If Hamas is the terrorist government of Gaza, UNRWA is basically the civil service of Gaza. And of course, the civil service reports to the government, and so it is in Gaza. By the way, UNRWA is so linked to the Hamas terrorists that Stephen Harper and other Western leaders cut it off a decade ago, stopped giving aid. But Trudeau, when he became PM again, pumped $50 million back into it. And just a couple of months ago, Trudeau pumped another $50 million into UNRWA. But UNRWA is hand in glove with Hamas. I'll say UN now instead of UNRWA because it's more pronounceable. The UN and Hamas share the same staff. UN staff literally participated in the October 7th terrorist attack. UN chat groups, like online chatter groups, with thousands of UN staff in Gaza, they celebrated the terrorist attacks on Israel. UN is Hamas. Hamas is the UN in Gaza. And let me end with the craziest story of all. The UN headquarters itself in Gaza. Underneath that, in the basement, a Hamas base. Here's what Israeli soldiers found when they came to the UN headquarters a couple of days ago. The UN office was upstairs. Hamas was downstairs, plugged into the UN systems, their power system, their computer system. It was in the same building. They shared the office. The UN itself was co-located with Hamas. They shared a mailing address. Just that tunnel they built. Here's what the head of the UN in Gaza said. UNRWA did not know what is under its headquarters in Gaza. UNRWA is made aware of reports through the media regarding a tunnel under the UNRWA headquarters in Gaza. Sure, you didn't know. You didn't know till journalists reported it. You had no idea those guys going downstairs with guns were, with hostages were. Did you see that tunnel? That's a year-long infrastructure project with heavy equipment and cement. Imagine saying you didn't know, or that Hamas, they just did that in the last week. So I ask again, why does Melanie Joly want Israel not to finish the job? I mean, Israel's already taken 90% or so of Gaza. Wouldn't taking Rafah end the war? And isn't that the best outcome, just to end the war? Well, maybe Melanie Joly doesn't actually want Hamas leadership to be captured or killed. I mean, she spent $100 million in Canadian tax money on Hamas. Maybe she doesn't want Hamas to lose. And just maybe there will be some things found in Rafah, like were found under the UN headquarters, like were found under the Al-Shifa hospital, that show that Trudeau and Joly and the rest of the liberal Hamas caucus knew a lot more about what was going on than they let on. I mean, Israel is finding many unusual things now that they're on the ground here. Let me quote one report here. The IDF, that's the Israel Defense Forces, say it located intelligence that Al Jazeera reporter Mohammed Wisha moonlights as a commander in Hamas's anti-armor unit. At the end of last year, he moved to the R&D division of Hamas's air unit. Surprised, not surprised. So that's a laptop that they found of an Al Jazeera journalist showing he's actually a Hamas terrorist too. I wonder if any of the CBC sources were Hamas terrorists too. I wonder if any Canadian staff were terrorists too. I wonder if Joly is worried about other records, a list of Hamas terrorists, membership list, because Mark Miller, the Liberal immigration minister, he has said he wants Canada to take literally thousands of Gaza refugees, and he's frustrated that it hasn't happened already. He's very impatient. That's what he said. Here's a clip.
I wanted to follow up on your comments in the House yesterday about the Rafah border and your frustrations with sort of getting family members out. Can you give me a sense of how many people have been pre-approved so far and what the challenges are?
Well, we have an initial list. The local authorities need to help us get people through the Rafah border crossing. Canada doesn't control that. And I'm pretty pissed off about it. We've made a pretty broad program for people that have relatives in Canada. It is unique, so perhaps perhaps there is some trepidation by people on the ground as to whether to let these folks out, but it's a humanitarian gesture, and it's immensely frustrating for me. I still think we have, before I speak more publicly on it, I think we still have some diplomatic work to do.
Now, opinion polls show that 75% or more of Gazans support Hamas. Every hospital, many schools, many mosques are Hamas bases. The UN's schools teach anti-Semitism and teach hating Israel. The whole place is a terrorism incubator. And Trudeau has been sending in millions of dollars and wants to bring thousands of them over here. Ending the war by defeating Hamas would stop a lot of Trudeau's plans, wouldn't it? But it would also save a lot of lives, Israeli lives, Arab lives, possibly even Canadian lives too.